Ever notice you know those sports teams that just can't seem to win when only like half their players show up?
Mm.
It's almost like they've already lost before the game even started.
Yeah,
That's kind of what happens in a democracy, I think, when people don't vote.
right.
It's like we're playing the game at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So you've sent us some fascinating stuff on voter engagement,
Yeah.
especially this Democracy in Action podcast, and I'm ready to dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, episode 1 is great.
Okay.
It lays out all the groundwork for why our vote really matters.
Okay.
And not just in that, like, feel good, be a good citizen way,
Right.
but, like, the real impact.
Okay. So walk me through this.
Okay.
Why is voting considered so essential? Democracy in Action kept using the phrase core mechanism.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean for us?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Voting is how we make our voices heard
Okay.
in a system that's designed to be, at least in theory,
Yeah.
by the people for the people.
Right.
When we vote, we're not just picking a candidate that we like.
Mm.
We're directly shaping the policies that affect our lives.
Right.
For example, remember the Clean Air Act? Like that landmark legislation was a direct result of massive voter mobilization around environmental concerns in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
It proves that high voter turnout on a specific issue can force politicians to sit up and take notice.
You've got a point there.
Yeah.
I remember learning about the Clean Air Act, but I never really connected it back to voter engagement like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Sure.
Our individual votes, when combined with others who share our concerns, really can influence change on a larger scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Democracy in Action brought in Dr. Emily Rivera,
Okay.
and she argued that many people believe their vote doesn't matter,
Yeah.
especially in the face of, larger societal or political forces.
Right.
But she reminds us that elections are often won or lost by incredibly slim margins.
That's true. We've seen some pretty nail-biting elections recently.
Right.
Is she suggesting that like a handful of votes can really make or break an election?
Well,
What about those structural factors we always hear about?
she used a very pointed example.
Okay.
The 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Right.
Remember how close that was in key swing states?
Wow. Yeah, I remember staying up all night watching the results roll in.
Yeah.
Totally on the edge of my seat.
The podcast argues that low voter turnout in those specific states could have very well influenced the outcome, which really highlights the potential power of each individual vote.
Wow.
It's a stark illustration of how even a small number of votes can have an outsized impact
Yeah.
on a national scale.
Wow.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder how many people just stayed home that day thinking,
right.
my vote won't matter. And look what happened.
Exactly.
I know Democracy in Action talked about the ripple effects of voter engagement, too.
Yeah.
Could you explain what they meant by that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the podcast argued that higher voter participation doesn't just impact who wins.
Okay.
It can shape the entire political landscape. When more people vote, elected officials are more likely to actually pay attention
Yeah.
to the diverse needs and desires of their constituents.
Right.
This often leads to policies that better reflect the public interest,
Okay.
like improved public services, investments in infrastructure,
Uh-huh.
and policies addressing social inequalities.
So it's about more than just casting a vote.
Yeah.
It's about creating a system where everyone's voice is actually heard,
Exactly.
and those voices are translated into tangible change.
Right. And on the flip side, low voter engagement can create a vacuum
Oh.
where special interests and lobbyists hold more sway, potentially leading to policies that benefit a select few
Right.
at the expense of the majority.
So it's kind of like we're handing over our power,
Yeah.
letting a small group of people make decisions that impact all of us.
And without that robust participation, it becomes much easier
Yeah.
for corruption to take root.
Right.
After all, if no one is paying attention,
Yeah.
it's easier to get away with things, right?
That's a sobering thought. It's like
Yeah.
we're not just letting our team down.
Right.
We're letting the whole game fall apart.
You got it.
Okay.
And Democracy in Action didn't just focus on like the political and societal implications.
Right.
They also delved into the psychological benefits of voting.
Oh, that's right. It's not just about laws and budgets.
Yeah.
It's about how we feel about our communities
Yeah.
and ourselves.
Exactly.
Right.
Voting can foster a sense of belonging, responsibility, and agency.
Uh-huh.
It allows individuals to feel like active participants in shaping the future
Yeah.
rather than passive observers.
Okay.
They actually had a fascinating discussion about different voting systems in the U.S.
Wait, really? I always assumed voting was pretty straightforward.
Uh-huh.
You go and cast your ballot, and that's it.
Right.
What else is there?
Well, we're all familiar with the first-past-the-post system,
Yeah.
where the candidate with the most votes wins,
Right.
even if they don't get a majority.
Right.
But there's also ranked choice voting, where voters rank candidates in order of preference.
I've heard of ranked choice voting,
Yeah.
but I never really understood how it works.
It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
So if no candidate gets a majority of first-place votes,
Okay.
the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated,
Oh.
and their votes are redistributed based on the second-place choices on those ballots.
Oh.
This process continues until one candidate has a majority.
Wow.
Proponents argue that it gives voters more choice
Okay.
and could lead to more moderate candidates being elected. They even mentioned a few states and cities that have experimented with this system with positive results.
That does sound like a more nuanced way of capturing the will of the people.
Yeah.
I can see how it could encourage more people to vote, too, knowing that their vote will still count, even if their top choice doesn't win.
Exactly.
But back to the psychological aspect.
Yes. The podcast suggested that even the simple act of voting can lead to a sense of empowerment and community engagement.
Okay.
When individuals feel like their voices matter, they're more likely to participate in other civic activities, like volunteering, attending town hall meetings,
Right.
or even running for office themselves.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah,
One positive action leads to another,
exactly.
creating a more engaged and vibrant democracy.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
And this increased civic engagement strengthens the fabric of our communities,
Yeah.
making them more resilient and responsive to the needs of their residents.
It's really amazing to think about how this one act, voting, can have such a profound impact on so many different levels.
It really is. And Democracy in Action emphasized that voting isn't just a right, it's a responsibility. It's about recognizing our power to shape our world and choosing to exercise that power.
So we've talked about the impact of voter engagement like on a national scale, but what about closer to home?
Right.
I mean, does showing up for local elections really make a difference?
That's a great question. And it's something Democracy in Action touched on as well.
Okay.
They argued that local elections can be even more impactful on our daily lives than national ones.
Interesting.
Think about it, school board members,
Right.
city councilors, mayors.
Right.
These are the people making decisions about the issues that directly affect our communities.
Yeah.
Schools, roads, parks, public safety.
You're right. We often get so caught up in the drama of national politics that we kind of forget about the decisions being made right in our own backyards.
Exactly. And because local elections often have lower voter turnout, your individual vote carries even more weight.
Wow.
It's like the podcast said, voting is like showing up for your team.
Yeah.
Your participation, combined with others who share your concerns, can determine the outcome of the game, so to speak.
It makes you think about all those local elections where only a handful of votes separated the winner from the runner-up.
Right.
Maybe if more people had shown up,
Right.
things might have turned out differently.
Absolutely. And the Democracy in Action team encouraged listeners to think about the issues they care about most deeply. Maybe it's education or environmental protection or access to affordable housing.
Right.
Whatever it is,
Okay.
increased voter engagement on that specific issue
Yeah.
can lead to real tangible change at the local level.
So it's about finding your passion and channeling that energy into action through your vote.
Exactly.
And hey, you might even inspire others to do the same.
Right. Each vote is like a ripple in a pond. And together, those ripples can create a wave of change
Wow.
that transforms our communities and our nation.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power and the responsibility we each hold as voters. Yeah. It's easy to feel like our individual actions don't matter. Right. But Democracy in Action makes a compelling case for why that couldn't be further from the truth.
I agree. It's about recognizing our agency
Okay.
and understanding that we have the power to shape the course of our society.
Right.
And it all starts with showing up and making our voices heard.
So as you go about your day, we leave you with this thought.
Okay.
What issue in your community or even at the national level could be moved forward with greater voter engagement?
Right.
What role could you play in making that happen?
Good question.
Because as we've learned today, your vote truly does matter.
It really does.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.